This is a bit of biology with Mr. Rock, and today we are going to do a Unit 1 review on ecology. So these are going to be major concepts that came up during the ecology unit, and one of the first ones is understanding a food web. The definition of a food web is it is a complex diagram that shows feeding relationships between species. And the main key thing that you need to take away from it as a student is that the arrow is representing one organism giving energy to another organism. So with that being said, on our little diagram here, there's an arrow pointing to the mouse from the grain. So the grain is giving energy to the mouse. Put simply, the mouse is eating the grain, but the arrow is pointing to the organism that is doing the eating. The arrow is now pointing to the owl. The owl is eating the mouse. The mouse is giving energy to the owl. So with this, it's going to be really helpful to understand the roles that organisms play in an ecosystem. And there's three main ones. So there's other ones besides this, but I thought these were the three most important. There are producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are also known as autotrophs. Autotrophs are organisms that can make their own energy. And most examples of this is organisms doing photosynthesis. So the example you can think of is plants. Plants making their own energy. These are producers. There are some other organisms that can make their own energy different ways, but we're not talking about that in this class. Consumers are heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that need to eat other organisms for energy. So humans, lions, many of the animals that you're currently thinking of are consumers. They are heterotrophs. They need to eat to get their food. Finally, decomposers, these are organisms that are going to break down dead organic material for energy. So compost, things like that. An example would be like earthworms or fungus. These are decomposers, and they also help us recycle nutrients into the ecosystem. Along the lines of recycling, we have this rule of 10%. And in biology, and in ecology specifically, I need you to know that nutrients are recycled within an ecosystem. So nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, water, those things are recycled throughout an ecosystem. But energy is lost as you move up the trophic levels. So trophic levels are things like primary producers, primary consumers, so we see producer-consumer come up again, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. And a quaternary consumer would be an apex predator, something like a lion, something like a hawk. And the rule of 10% is that only 10% of the energy gets passed from trophic level to trophic level. So primary producers is a trophic level. If we have 10,000 plants in an ecosystem, those 10,000 plants would only be able to support 1,000 primary consumers, because 1,000 is 10% of 10,000. So only 10% gets passed on then to the secondary consumers. So if we have 1,000 mice, then we're only going to have 100 snakes, and then you continue to move up. So the rule of 10%, only 10% of energy is passed on to the next trophic level, because energy is lost at each trophic level. And the last concept here that we need to talk about, once again, we're talking about organisms, but in relation to one another. So there are types of symbiotic relationships, and these are the most popular ones. So predation is a very popular one, and I think that's one most people know. It is positive for one organism, and it is negative for another organism. So a lion eating a gazelle, that's predation. Good for the lion, positive, negative for the gazelle. Parasitism looks a lot like predation, but the parasite is not trying to kill its host. So we have positive and negative dog and a wood tick. So the wood tick gets a positive because it's taking blood and resources from the dog, it is a negative. Commensalism, one organism is benefited, the other one does not mind. This is the shark and the remora fish. The remora fish latches onto the shark to get a free ride. The shark does not care that the remora fish is on them. So it's good for the remora fish, free transportation. Shark doesn't care, so it gets a 0. And then the last and final one, mutualism, it is good for both organisms. So we have a plus relationship, so 2 positives. A good example here, clownfish and sea anemone. Clownfish cleans the sea anemone, and the sea anemone protects the clownfish with the poisonous tentacles. This has been a bit of biology, and I'm signing off.